This is Northern Light for Wednesday, July 10th. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Catherine Wheeler. We asked and you responded. Amy Feiereisel joins us to talk about new state social media regulations and the role it has in the lives of the North Country's families.
Also, the region and much of Vermont will enter a flood watch later this morning as what's left of Hurricane Beryl reaches the area. You can expect heavy rain and thunderstorms throughout the day and tonight.
And later this morning, it's the 30th year of the Ottawa Blues Fest. Big acts like Motley Crue and Zac Brown Band are taking on the main stage now through the weekend. Hear more about some of the lesser-known artists.
I find I've got to take some stuff and go commit to an act so I can see what journey they're taking me on in their set. But there are things I have stumbled upon.
All that's coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us. Support for Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio comes from Mountain Orthotic and Prosthetic Services, a full-service practice committed to providing care for patients of all ages, with offices in Lake Placid, Plattsburgh, and Malone. Details and referrals at mountainonp.com. And by St. Lawrence Nurseries in Potsdam, providing the North Country with cold, hardy fruit and nut trees for over 100 years, slngrow.com.
This is Northern Light. I'm Catherine Wheeler.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Last month, Governor Kathy Hochul signed into law a social media bill. It's the first of its kind and requires social media companies to limit what they show kids. Amy Feiereisel is in to talk about that legislation and to report back your thoughts about the role social media plays in kids' lives. We asked our texting club about it. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Monica. I'm happy to be here with you.
So glad to have you. Well, first off, let's talk about this bill and exactly what it's limiting.
So under the new legislation, children wouldn't see suggested posts on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. Suggested posts come from algorithms, which are trying to feed you content that you'll be interested in.
So kids would just see posts from people they've chosen to follow, right?
Exactly, like friends and family and other users that child has sought out themselves. And the idea here is that many social media platforms are designed to be addictive and that kids shouldn't be exposed to that when they're less than 18 years old.
And this mirrors big shifts on the national level, too. I mean, there was a big announcement from the U.S. Surgeon General recently about social media.
Yes, Dr. Vivek Murthy announced in June that he'll be pushing for a warning label for social media platforms that would advise parents that platforms could damage kids' mental health. That would be like the warning labels on tobacco and alcohol. Murthy has been moving in this direction for a few years now, based on new research and studies about social media. Last year, he recommended parents set phone use limits, and he's called on tech companies to change or restrict features like autoplay and the infinite scroll.
Well, and he's actually said that features like those, quote, prey on developing brains and contribute to excessive use. I mean, that's pretty strong language. Well, so does this signify somewhat of a shifting tide on how society thinks about the internet and social media and how it should be regulated for young people, do you think?
It certainly seems that way. You know, there's a current proposal in California to restrict phone use at school. This is a hot topic on the national stage, like lots of different legislation. Of course, one of the biggest challenges, especially with the New York law, will be implementation. Critics, which are mostly tech companies, say, it's essentially limiting free speech. They also argue that the science on harmful impacts of social media isn't settled.
And then there's the time it'll take to just make these changes on the platforms, right?
Exactly. So in New York, for the limiting of suggested posts for kids, we're looking at least 6 months, probably longer. The state attorney general has to craft the actual rules, and then the social media companies will have 180 days to implement them. There will certainly be lawsuits, so no changes in the immediate future.
Now, let's get to what North Country folks are thinking about social media and teenagers. Through our texting club, you heard from North Country parents and families and educators, too.
Yeah, it's a topic a lot of folks are passionate about. What everyone seems to agree on is that social media is definitely a challenge for the modern day child. Carl Kirka texted us, "They're wasting their lives online, getting depressed and not interacting with real life." Nelson Spratt said, "I see social media as a detriment to young people's lives and their attention spans." Now, where folks diverge is how to tackle social media usage and if it's something that even can be controlled. Danielle Brown from Watertown says she sees a lot of educational and inspirational value on the internet and thinks adults need to lead the way with how to use social media as a tool. That's something she spent several years trying to help her nieces do.
They're family members, and I homeschooled them during the pandemic. So we were on social media all the time, find a recipe or a new painting that we wanted to try or learning how to sew. There were all these different wonderful things that all exists on there, just like there's a bunch of terrible and toxic stuff that exists on there, and it's my opinion, you should teach people, how to use it.
She feels like her nieces now know how to say no and, to seek out positive, realistic content. Her take, which is one we heard from a lot of people, is that, social media is here and it's up to parents to teach their kids how to deal with it.
And Joan Grabe texted in. She said, quote, "I heard this decades ago about rock and roll. That horse was out of the barn and this one is too. We just have to try and raise resilient kids who have balanced lives and can self-regulate their use of social media." And then there's the big question of whether these social media restrictions will even work. Teens are pretty tech savvy.
Yeah, so here's Connor Eldridge, a high school English teacher at Madrid Waddington Central School in St. Lawrence County. He's been teaching for 11 years. He says from his experience, social media is both kids' primary way that they socialize and their primary source of entertainment. So he thinks keeping them off it will be difficult.
So I haven't met many teenagers who aren't really creative in finding different ways to go around those things. Even today, teenagers will talk about how they have kind of their own little burner phone that their parents may not be aware of, or they'll access social media on their friends' phones. So they're already finding ways to get around those parental limitations.
But what Eldridge and a lot of other folks I spoke with also said is that many kids, especially teens, are fully aware that this is a problem and that the apps are built to be addictive. So can we really expect kids to self-regulate?
Most teenagers, especially older teenagers, will tell you that the algorithm is very addictive, and a lot of them do feel like their screen time is really bad and they would love to get out of it and cut back on their screen time, but they find it really hard.
Yeah. And what about how it impacts the school environment and his role as a teacher?
As an educator, he says pretty much any teacher would tell you, it's a distraction in the classroom. It can lead to bullying. He also thinks it's led to less in-person engagement in things like sports and extracurricular activities, especially since 2020 and the coronavirus pandemic.
And we started talking about the state restricting social media with a new law, but some schools are already experimenting with this. Some school districts are introducing phone bans during the school day.
Yeah, there's been legislation introduced in a number of states that allow districts to ban phones. The Los Angeles Unified School District banned phones earlier this year. And New York City Public Schools, the largest school district in the country, says it'll have a phone ban in place sometime this next school year. That was announced, just a couple weeks ago. So it's an idea that's really gaining steam and momentum.
And as I understand it, there's a school in the North Country that's experimented with that idea, too.
Yes, so Saranac Lake Central School District tried something different this past school year. Their combined middle and high school is located in a spot with basically no cell service. And they changed the Wi-Fi password and haven't been giving it to students. So the kids still have their phones, but they're not allowed to have them out. And they're a lot less tempted because they have no connection to the internet throughout the school day. Kelsey Francis is a high school English teacher for Saranac Lake. She's been there for over 20 years. She says this was the first year in many that she didn't have to play phone police, and that she had an amazing year.
I have just seen a huge benefit in the engagement in my class, kids talking in the hallway, people are looking up instead of looking down. And it made just group work. I just made everything going on in my class that much more enjoyable, because there is a fear. A lot of students worry about being, taking risks as far as like volunteering for something or performing in an English class. People worry about being recorded or having a photo posted. And so all of that was gone, which was just wonderful.
And did she say, how did the kids feel about it?
So Frances says there was a lot of griping for the first 2 weeks of the year and a sentiment that the school was just being way too strict. But then mostly students took it in stride and it kind of became the new normal.
And you heard from a lot of people about this, too many to fit in this conversation this morning. But you'll be having more stories to come on this.
Yes, so we'll be hearing from some high school students from Parishville Hopkinton Central School tomorrow who actually wrote a song about it. And then later this week, we'll hear from a mother and daughter in Lake Placid.
Yes, lots to look forward to. Thanks so much for the reporting, Amy.
Thank you, Monica.
And a reminder to our listeners that all of these stories came from you, our listeners, our neighbors. When we asked you to share your thoughts on social media and its impact on kids, that was through NCPR's Texting Club. And if you'd like to help shape NCPR's coverage, join the Texting Club right now. Just text the word NEW, that's NEW, to 315-978-6277. Text the word NEW to 315-978-6277.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 8:12. Good morning. I'm Catherine Wheeler.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up on the show, the Commissioner of New York's Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services will be on the show to discuss the coming severe weather. The National Weather Service has issued a flood watch for the North Country and much of Vermont as the remnants of Hurricane Beryl push through. More details coming up in just a few minutes right here on Northern Light. Support for the station comes from the North Country Children's Museum Potsdam, with hands-on and minds-on exhibits and programs for children 12 and under and their families, open Wednesday to Sunday, 10 to 5. NorthCountryChildren'sMuseum.org. And by Blue Seed Studios, a multidisciplinary art center featuring classes for adults and youth, concerts, art exhibits, and more. BLUSeedstudios.org. Music now by Oscar Sarmiento out of Potsdam. Watertown's only shelter for unhoused people will close at the end of the month. The Watertown Daily Times reports Thrive Wellness and Recovery's shelter for men opened back in February 2023. Staff have found current residents new places to go. Officials say they didn't have the funding to stay open, but they're hoping to purchase a property to open a shelter thanks to a new state program. Meanwhile, another planned project for a city shelter won't get off the ground. Jefferson County had set aside $700,000 earlier this year to buy 16 housing units, but there isn't a location and prices have gone up.
A person died while in Watertown police custody on Monday. Police say they were performing a traffic stop when a passenger fled on foot. They were apprehended, and police say during the walk back to the vehicle, the person had a medical issue. They were transported to Samaritan Medical Center, where they died. The cause of death is unknown, and the individual's name hasn't been released. State police and the Attorney General's office are investigating.
Volunteer firefighters, including here in the North Country, are scrambling to figure out how they'll adapt to new federal firefighting standards. NCPR intern Zach Jaworski has more.
Proposed regulations by OSHA, the Federal Workplace Safety Agency, have small volunteer fire departments worried. The Saranac Lake Volunteer Fire Department is one of them. Chief Michael Knopp says the proposed regulations are expensive and could be detrimental to small departments. For example, under current guidelines, fire departments pay around $150 for their firefighters to get physical exams. Under the proposed guidelines, they'd have to get exams through the National Fire Protection Agency.
If they go to follow the NFPA standard for physicals, you're looking at, a rough cost of $1,600 per member. These smaller departments with a smaller operating budget and just the cost of the physicals alone is enough to sink them and put them under.
Along with changes to physicals, firefighters would also have to participate in more trainings, which costs the fire department money and the firefighters time. Also, departments would need to inspect vehicles more often and create in-depth written rescue plans for much of the area they serve. Departments currently only need plans for larger buildings and busier locations.
On the clerical side of things, the paperwork that's going to be required is going to be roughly an additional 180 to 200 hours a year on the administrative side.
Knopp says he wants his department to be as safe as possible, and he'll comply with all future regulations, but he wants OSHA to make changes more affordable for smaller departments. Knopp says his department has not yet been informed of when the new regulations would kick in. He also says OSHA was unclear about how long he would have to get his department in compliance. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Zach Jaworski in Canton.
2 employees at the Tractor Supply store near Saranac Lake say they're resigning in response to the company's decision to eliminate its diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental commitments at all of its stores. The Adirondack Daily Enterprise reports that the store's general manager, Joe Montello, who identifies as a gay man, says he feels betrayed by Tractor Supply. The company's decision comes after weeks of online backlash demanding it eliminate policies that didn't align with its conservative customer base.
Tractor Supply says it plans to phase out DEI initiatives and stop sponsoring non-business activities like pride festivals and voting campaigns. The statement also says the company will scrap its carbon emission goals and realign itself with rural American politics. The Adirondack Diversity Initiative says it condemns Tractor Supply's decision and will continue to stand with its LGBTQIA+ neighbors called out by the company's memo.
State Attorney General Tish James has announced a settlement with the former chief financial officer of the National Rifle Association. It bans him from working in a similar role in New York for a decade. The Democrat says the settlement with Wilson Woody Phillips also requires him to undergo training before returning to work as a nonprofit fiduciary. A jury ordered Phillips to pay $2 million in damages in February.
The Attorney General's case against the NRA found the organization and former top officials liable for breaking not-for-profit laws. As a part of the legal effort launched in 2020, former longtime NRA President Wayne LaPierre was also found to have abused his position. LaPierre, who resigned after 30 years on the eve of the trial, was ordered to pay more than $4 million to the NRA. The second phase of the trial begins Monday to determine non-monetary damages.
New York is expected to ramp up renewable energy production in the coming years, but it's unlikely to meet its target of obtaining 70% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030. Those findings are from a recent review by the Department of Public Service. The report estimates that the state will likely have generated only enough renewable energy to meet around 45% of its electricity needs by the end of the decade.
The gap is in part due to the cancellation of some offshore wind and other large-scale renewable projects and increased demand as we replace more gas power with electricity. The report outlines a path to rapidly increase renewable energy generation by deploying large-scale renewable projects, but it says those projects are likely to take years to get off the ground. Last night, the Ottawa Blues Fest country star Jelly Roll rocked the main stage.
I only talk to God when I need a favor, and I only pray when I ain't got a prayer.
And tonight, Zac Brown Band has the top bill.
You know I'm a chicken fried. And cold beer on a Friday night. A pair of jeans that fit just right. And the radio.
Heavy metal rockers Motley Crue and New York City rapper Nas will also headline before the festival winds down on Sunday.
But the main stage is only one of 4 stages at the Ottawa Blues Festival. Those smaller ones are the places to discover your newest favorite artist. Ottawa Blues Fest is celebrating its 30th year. The festival's Joe Riley introduced to David Summerstein some of those lesser-known musicians playing this week and through the weekend.
Closing night on our river stage, there's something super special happening. There's a local artist called Fan Club Wallet, who I adore her pop sensibility. It is such great pop music that she makes. And I've never seen her. I've gotten to talk to her for my own radio show and play her music, and I love it. So I'm looking forward to that.
I was driving when the airbag popped and knocked sense into me. I was crying when the shrapnel hit and cut out part of me. You were lying when the cop asked you about me. The car's on fire. You inside. Who's to say what it means?
But right after she finishes, Ben Howard from the UK is performing. He has never been in Ottawa. I've seen him twice in Montreal. Both shows completely blew my mind. He's one of these harmonic guitar players. He's a beautiful player. He writes incredible songs. I'm really looking forward to seeing him perform here in Ottawa because he really takes his music somewhere else.
Darling, you're with me, always around me. Only love, darling, I feel you under my body. Only love, give me shelter, or show me heart. Come on, love, watch me fall apart.
There's another artist I really want to mention. His name is Raphael Wainwright Brown. He's a local artist because there's some great local artists. Fan Club Wallet is local as well. He is a cello player, and he does performances with looping. And he lays down one kind of thing on his cello and then works on laying down something else on top of it. And he just builds and builds and builds these absolutely fantastic pieces of music. And live, I saw him working with a dance troupe. It's the only time I've seen him. I haven't seen him do his own show yet. And he was just completely floored me with the strength of his work. So he's going to be great. Lots of good stuff happening. And, for me, I follow music pretty closely. And every year when this lineup comes out, I've got to go dig in and check out and find links to some of the music from some of the artists I've never heard of before, because every year there's discoveries for me.
You do have several stages, and you do have a lot of names who people haven't heard of. And it's a chance to just sort of, wander around and see what catches your ear.
It's interesting, too, because it becomes one of those things where, and friends of mine, we have discussions of this, and other journalists who come down to talk about this, too, whether you have to commit to something to truly experience it, right? Like, if you're running around doing the buffet, some people love that. I find it hard. I find I've got to take some stuff and go commit to an act so I can see what journey they're taking me on in their set. But there are things I have stumbled upon. I still remember the first time Lord Huron came to Ottawa. I remember my daughter texted me. I said, I just left the photo pit for Lord Huron. She said, no, my friends have said, you go back and watch that. So I did, and I was blown away. Another artist, I really love global rhythms and stuff, and Bombino is coming back to the festival. That's coming up on Friday, July 12th. A really fantastic global rhythm, touching on a lot of different kinds of stuff, drawing into the Bombino sound. So that would be fantastic as well. This is our 30th anniversary edition, and it was funny because prior to talking to you, I was going back over part of our history, right? And we started off in a small park in 2004 where Clarence Clemens, Buckwheat Zydeco, and Randy Bachman were the headliners. You look at the evolution of an event that grows up kind of holistically like this one did, right? Out of the community. In 1998, we had Ray Charles come in, and that was a bump up. And then the next year, Mark brought in Sting, and I know that people across the industry were going, what do these guys think they're doing, bringing Sting to their festival? And we made it work, and it's just been like very holistic growth of this event over the years, growth within the community, the volunteer base that supports it and makes it happen, but also throughout the industry, getting ourselves established and recognize that we know how to put on a show, and we're going to put on a great show both for audience and artists.
Joe Riley is a spokesman for the Ottawa Blues Festival. He spoke with David Summerstein. The event runs through this Sunday with dozens of musicians playing on 4 stages at the LeBreton Flat Park in downtown Ottawa. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Catherine Wheeler.
And I'm Monica Sandreski.
In just a minute, a conversation on what severe weather you can expect today. But first, Monica has a look at the weather.
Yes, at last check, it was 68 degrees in Wells down in the southern Adirondack, 72 degrees in Queensbury right now, 68 degrees in Lake Placid, 72 degrees in Port Henry, 68 in Malone, and 70 degrees in Gouverneur. Mostly cloudy skies throughout the region right now, with temperatures rising into the mid-70s today. But the National Weather Service has issued a flood watch for the North Country and much of Vermont as the remnants of Hurricane Beryl push through the region. Rounds of heavy rain showers and thunderstorms are forecasted for today.